بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، نحمده ونشكره على هدايته، ثم الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا محمد وعلى آله الطاهرين وصحبه المنتجبين. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجه. Praise be to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Lord of here and the hereafter. We praise and thank Him for the guidance that we receive from Him on a continuous basis. We greet and salute the most select of all the prophets, our Prophet Muhammad and his pure progenies. Sisters and brothers, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to the first of a series of lectures on Muslim participation in public square. قال الإمام الصادق صلوات الله وسلامه عليه: العالم بزمانه لا تهجم عليه اللوابس. The person who is well informed of his time will not be caught off guard by the suddenness of the event. This hadith is part of a series, a number of ahadith that they focus on the same theme, commanding and encouraging people, the believers, that they need to be, so to speak, streetwise. And once they are aware of what is going on around them, they will not be caught napping and surprised. There are a number of hadith from Amir al-Mu'mineen and other Imams about the same thing. There is one, أعرف الناس بالزمان من لم يتعجب من أحداثه. This is from Amir al-Mu'mineen salawatullah salamu alayhi. The most learned about his time is the one that is not surprised by the events. They have assessed the time and what is happening. They have analyzed it. They have prepared themselves for it, so they are not caught by surprise. As we approach, we have approximately 2 months left before the election 2020, which I believe it's the most decisive election in our contemporary history. All elections in the past were in a way or the other critical, but this is decisive because of what we went through during the past or gone through during the past 3 or 4 years, and how surprised by not taking responsibility, how surprised we were by the event. The goal of these lectures is to remind everyone that the seriousness of this election or the event requires us to really get our acts together and prepare and plan. But before I begin, as they say, delve into the issue, there are a number of points that need to be clarified. Number one, over 40% of the Muslims in the world currently live in a minority situation and a minority state, in which in lands and countries that people of different faith, ideologies have administrative, political, legislative authority and power over them. In the West, and particularly in the United States, Islam has remained invisible, both on the cognitive map of the American population, most Americans, as well as on the political and the public square. While the public square for others is a space in which, irrespective of their faith, they can participate and become active in a social, political, economic, and every other domain that one could imagine. But for the Muslim community, unfortunately, the public square is vacant. There is nothing in it. There are certain events in the past at least 20 or some years, such as 9/11, the occupation of Iraq, and Middle East crisis and wars and so on, that has brought the Muslims, to the attention of the diverse American population. But if we pay attention, an insignificant segment or percentage of the American population knows anything about Islam. This is a critical factor. From late 1970 and early 1980, as the scholars began to look at the way the Muslims were spreading creating a unique reality in diaspora, they began to search for how to organize the affairs of these Muslims. And their affair became the theme of conferences, seminars organized in various countries, including the one by Organization of Islamic Council of Europe in 1980 in London, that the articles were collected in some kind of a book. But unfortunately, because most of these seminars focus on identity of Muslim, what constitutes their identity, rather than coming up with a clear and precise strategy for active participation in the community and the public square, these seminars and conferences led nowhere. During the next, I suppose one could call it few weeks or 6 or 7 weeks before the election, I would like to focus on our responsibility, Muslims within the United States. How should we organize ourselves? But we cannot organize anything if we are not aware of the challenges that we have to deal with. Muslims in the United States in general have to deal with 3 major issues, broadly speaking. Number 1, the issue of identity. Number 2, the issue of participation. And number 3, the crisis of value and the code of conduct and moral issues. Within these upcoming weeks, I would like to focus on the second of these 3. Inshallah, in another time, we may pay attention to number 1, the identity and the code of conduct and the moral principles. I want to focus primarily on the issue of participation. How far should we go, or how far to be active in the community life and public affair? That's the question that we want to kind of analyze and step around it and see if we can come to some kind of a solution. In the past, whether it was in England or any other parts, or even in the United States, every time there is an election, there would be a group of people that appear with voices that it is haram for Muslims to participate in any political establishment or actively participate in public squares, whether it is in US or somewhere else. It is encouraging to note that over time, the attitude of what I call the isolationists, and I remember in 2004, I believe, the Islamic Student Association, the Iranian group, organized a seminar in California, and there were a number of speakers calling for isolation of the Muslim community, not to participate. We really need to stay away and somehow build some kind of a cocoon around ourselves and stay within it, as if this was possible. There are few questions to clarify the position. I believe these questions would clarify the irrationality of those who profess that we should stay away from the political establishment. Number one, can Muslims live in the United States without obeying the law? Number two, can they refuse to pay US taxes, even the taxes are not remotely Islamic? Can they become US citizen without allegiance to the US Constitution, which is not an Islamic one? Can they insist on their money that it should not be used against other Muslim countries or in support of Zionism or etc., etc.? I don't think any answer to any of these questions could be positive, or no, you cannot. Since they cannot long endure without obeying the law, then the defining question is, shouldn't we, in the light of the other question, try to influence the process of making these laws? Voting becomes the first step, a part of participation. The process of influencing making these laws. Without voting, you have no voice. You are not there. You cannot ask for any influence. You will not have any influence. Let's be frank, nobody in the United States is going to put political power for the Muslim community on a silver tray and say, here you are, you can now exercise it. It's not going to happen, sisters and brothers. The other question is, once we have accepted that there is no way out of this crisis without participation, at least the first step in voting for the elections, the next question comes to take this process of participation and influencing the process of making laws by taking it a stage further and actually making ourselves candidates to be elected to the office. This is the process of empowerment of the Muslim community. Once we are elected, we go through the usual process. Muslims would be influencing directly making of these laws and their implementation and their enforcement. Elected offices that up to now are barren when it comes to the presence of Muslims and insensitive to our needs and particular requirement, then they become more sensitive to the Muslim experience, whether it is in the political, legal, judicial, or anywhere else. We must be present. Once we have accepted that we cannot live outside the law and everything else that can explain, we had no other alternative but to move forward with the election, and now actual candidacy becomes the stage in which we build on the election and we present ourselves as in the process of empowerment. Let's make one thing clear. We as Muslims, I have repeatedly talked about this in various khutbatul Jum'ah, we as Muslims are obligated to offer and provide an alternative to the prevailing narratives that exist, particularly if the prevailing narratives fail to be inclusive and just, without shadow of a doubt. When, under the guidance of the Holy Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Islam entered the global scene, it did not do so to play the second fiddle, so to speak, and play a minority role and be marginalized. Islam entered the global arena with a full intent to work, establish itself, to have its own unique worldview, and wherever it's necessary, provide the society with moral codes to change the life of the society for the better that Islam came to exist. Culture, way of thinking, moral codes, etc., etc. Under this, I can remind you of a story in the early history of Islam, the first migration from Mecca to Habasha, when finally the confrontation took place between people coming from Mecca and Ja'far ibn Abi Talib representing the Muslim community. This was precisely the point that he put to the king of Habasha. We are here as a group of people with a unique worldview, and we want to be good citizens and provide and make contribution to the well-being of everybody else, not just to hide in a closet somewhere. We as Muslims, we cannot simply stay and look back nostalgically to the past history and say the golden era, this, and if there was a golden era. I think we are obligated, we learn from the past, but we look at the present and we plan for the future that ultimately create our own golden age, not the past. The past is gone. The issue is not for us whether we should participate or not. The issue is how to participate. That's the critical issue. And I believe during the coming lectures, I will do my best to clarify this. But we really need to, before we start the strategy, developing a strategy for how to participate, we really need to find out be mindful of two critical issues. Number one, the prevailing the success or failure of the participation of Muslims or any minority within the larger scope of society around them, or us Muslim in a non-Muslim, depends upon a long series of complex factors that could be somehow contained or grouped together under two headings. Number one, the prevailing socio-economic and political climate of the society at large, which determines the space available for the citizens of different background to share the public space. And unfortunately, we don't have that. Inshallah, next week we would dwell and try to shed light on it. But that's a different issue. The second one is factors derived mainly from the characteristics of the minority group or the society themselves. Their skill in building up representative organization which can defend their rights, both on a local, regional, and national level. Alhamdulillah, we have been successful to a degree on a local level. Brothers and sisters within our community have put their names forward, and after through a struggle, a few of them have been able to succeed and occupy offices. I'm hoping that these individuals would work to make the office that they occupy sensitive to the community need. Cultural, religious attitude towards political participation. This is something that inshallah we will be unpacking. And a number of developing identity regarding prevailing system. This is a critical issue. We really need to be able to prepare ourselves and structure our lives, and to plan for it. We really need to understand the dynamic of the political system that exists in the United States. We may have a superficial, shallow understanding of the what we call the two-party system. We may have some misunderstanding, misconception of left and right within politics. We may have no clear understanding of how the dynamics within these parties work as far as national and international issues. These are issues that we really need. So when somebody puts him or herself as a candidate, say for the Democratic Party, what is our understanding of the Democrats vis-a-vis the regional and national issues as well as international issues? And when somebody else puts his name forward or her name forward as a Republican, exactly what is going on? What is the systemic nature? One of the misconceptions that we have regarding American political establishment, we think it is individualistic. When Obama came to power, we started throwing our hands up, or something unique has happened. And I remember in 2008, in a lecture that I gave in a church in Denver, Colorado, I made it clear that nothing is going to change. We, the marginalized, what is called in the post-colonial narrative, the wretched of the earth, we are, to us, it doesn't matter whether the person is black, white, Chinese, Jew, Muslim, or Christian, or even an atheist. What we want is for that person to be able to be sensitive to our rights as citizens in this country, and opening up the public square for us, not to walk as space invaders, but to walk as citizens with all full right within it. Those of you who still remember in 2016, what happened after the election? We went through the most insulting period since the election of the current occupier of the presidency. War never stopped, everything continued, and etc., etc. We really need to understand the dynamic of the political system in this country. And if we don't move forward, if we don't take, as they say, the bull by the horn and try to establish ourselves, somebody else will be speaking on our behalf that they are not sensitive to our own need and experience. We only have about 7 or 8 weeks maximum. If the current occupier of this house does not change the system and postpone the election. If it happens, then God help us all. But if it doesn't, we really need to be surprised. So after the election, we will not be somehow lamenting the fact that due to our apathy, staying back, not moving forward, not taking initiative, not trying to work, the election was taken and somebody comes to power that is least sensitive to our experience and our needs. I stop here, and inshallah, next week we will continue. Every Tuesday we will continue with this, and hopefully next week I will talk about the political dynamics of the two-party system in the United States, and we move on ultimately to what should we do as a community? How should we prepare ourselves? Thank you very much. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.